Beneath the Arctic Ocean, hidden in complete darkness, there is enough firepower to end modern civilization. It moves in complete silence, it can disappear for months, and the vessel carrying it is so large that when engineers first saw the blueprints, some of them thought the dimensions were a mistake. It wasn't. The Typhoon-class submarine, still the largest ever built by any nation on Earth, by a margin that makes everything else in the water look like a different species entirely. 6 were built. The program was classified, the cost was never fully disclosed, and the philosophy behind it was pure Soviet logic. When the Americans built bigger, the Soviets didn't match them. They made everything else look small. This is what it actually looks like inside. Before you can understand the Typhoon, you have to understand the problem it was built to solve. By the late 1970s, the United States had developed the Ohio-class submarine. The Ohio was fast, deep-diving, and could carry 24 Trident ballistic missiles. The Soviets needed an answer. Their existing submarine-launched missiles were larger and heavier than American equivalents, which meant any vessel carrying them would need to be built around the missiles rather than the other way around. Most engineers would treat that as a constraint. The Soviet military treated it as an invitation. The result was a vessel so large that the design team essentially built 2 pressure holes side by side and enclosed them inside a third outer hull. Not one submarine, 2 submarines, structurally sharing a common outer shell. The space between the inner holes and the outer casing became storage for ballast tanks, torpedo equipment, and systems that on any other submarine would have had nowhere to go. The Typhoon displaced 48,000 tons when submerged. The Ohio, for comparison, displaces around 1,800. You could fit 2.5 Ohio-class submarines inside a Typhoon and still have some room left over. That number is worth sitting with for a moment. This was not a refinement of existing submarine design. It was a complete reimagining of what a submarine could be. Here is where it gets strange. Most submarines are not comfortable. They are functional, tight, deliberately stripped of anything that isn't necessary. Space is the one thing you cannot manufacture underwater, so every centimeter gets used for something operational. Crew quarters on most attack submarines are so small that sailors sleep in rotating shifts because there simply aren't enough bunks for everyone at once. The Typhoon is not most submarines. Because the design created so much internal volume, Soviet engineers were faced with an unusual problem they almost never encountered: too much space. The solution they landed on was, by submarine standards, almost absurd. The Typhoon received a small swimming pool, a sauna, a lounge area with television, crew quarters that, by the standards of submarine service anywhere in the world, were genuinely comfortable, individual cabins for officers rather than shared berths, and a recreation room that doubled as a cinema. Keep in mind, these men could be submerged for 3 to 6 months at a stretch. No sunlight, no fresh air, no contact with the world above the waterline. The Soviet Navy understood something important. You cannot keep human beings functional in a steel tube under the ocean for that long without giving them somewhere to put their minds when they're off duty. A crew that is psychologically deteriorating is a crew that makes mistakes. And on a vessel carrying nuclear weapons, mistakes are not an option. So they built them a pool. It sounds almost darkly funny until you understand the weight of what these men were living with every single day they were down there. The Typhoon carried enough destructive capability to end civilizations. The sauna was not a luxury, it was a management decision. The vessel also carried a dedicated medical bay, full cooking facilities, and enough provisions to sustain its 160-man crew without resupply for the entire duration of a patrol. Everything needed to keep those men alive, focused, and ready was built into the hull. Nothing was left to chance. 20 missiles. That is the Typhoon's primary armament. Each RSM-52 ballistic missile sits in its own launch tube forward of the sail. Arranged in 2 rows of 10, when the order comes, those missiles can be fired in rapid succession, through the water from a submerged vessel moving at operational depth. The system was designed to deliver a full salvo within minutes, because in a nuclear exchange, minutes are the entire margin between a second strike and no strike at all. Each missile carries multiple, independently targetable warheads. The full specifications remain classified. What is public is enough. A single Typhoon, operating alone, represented a nuclear deterrent significant enough that the entire strategic calculus of any conflict had to account for its position at all times. This is precisely the point. The Typhoon was not designed to win a war. It was designed to make a war unwinnable for anyone who started one. A guaranteed second strike capability hidden under Arctic ice, impossible to locate with certainty, and impossible to neutralize preemptively without risking the exact response it was built to deliver. The Hunt for Red October, the novel and the film, drew directly on the mythology surrounding vessels like this. A submarine so capable and so large that its existence alone reshapes the balance of power. Fiction, but not by much. The Typhoon was specifically designed to operate under the Arctic ice shelf. This was not incidental. The Arctic gave Soviet submarines something invaluable: invisibility. The ice above makes detection from the surface nearly impossible. The acoustic conditions underwater disrupt sonar in ways that consistently favor the submarine over the hunter. And the geography placed a Typhoon beneath the polar ice cap within range of targets across the entire northern hemisphere, without ever needing to move into waters where it might be tracked. To surface through the ice, the Typhoon was built with a reinforced sail and a hull strong enough to break through from below. Crew members have described watching the ice shatter overhead as the boat rose, emerging into an Arctic landscape with no human presence for hundreds of miles in any direction. How do you prepare someone for that? Months underwater, in permanent darkness, under ice that blocks out every connection to the world above. No news, no sunlight, no way to know what was happening up there while you waited below. Former crew members have described a specific kind of psychological weight that doesn't have a clean name, knowing that if the order ever came, the world they surfaced into wouldn't be the one they left. The psychological demands of that service sit in a category most people never have to think about, and most never will. 6 Typhoons were built between 1976 and 1989. The program cost the Soviet state a sum that was never fully disclosed and, by most estimates, never fully calculated. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the money to maintain them collapsed with it. Nuclear submarines do not age gracefully when maintenance budgets disappear. Reactor systems require constant attention. Hull integrity does demand regular inspection, and without that, a nuclear vessel sitting in port does not simply become useless, it becomes dangerous. For years, several Typhoons sat deteriorating in ports at Severodvinsk, underfunded and largely forgotten, which created a problem that extended well beyond Russia's borders. A poorly maintained nuclear submarine is a risk to everyone, not just its owners. Fuel leaks, reactor instability, structural degradation. The vessels that had once represented the pinnacle of Soviet military power were now representing something else entirely. 4 were eventually dismantled, partly with funding assistance from the United States under the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program. The logic was straightforward and quietly remarkable. 2 former Cold War adversaries jointly paying to dismantle weapons that had been pointed at each other for decades? Well, because the alternative was worse for both of them. One Typhoon, the Dmitry Donskoy, remained in active service as a test platform for newer missile systems. As of the most recent public reporting, it is the last of its class still afloat. The most powerful submarine ever built, now functioning as a testing platform. There is something in that worth thinking about. The other hulls are gone. No country has built anything like it since. That is partly economics. The Typhoon was a product of a specific moment, a specific arms race, and a specific political system willing to spend without limit on a problem it considered existential. That combination has not repeated itself and likely never will. But it is also because the question the Typhoon was built to answer now has a different shape. The threats are different, the technology is different, and the calculus of deterrence has moved on. What hasn't changed is the basic proposition the Typhoon represented, that somewhere beneath the ocean, beyond detection, beyond reach, something is always waiting. The largest submarine ever built understood that better than anything else in the water. If this is the kind of content you want more of, subscribe and hit the like button. We'll see you next time.